Okay, my name is Micah Anderson. I'm a horticulture educator for Extension for Langston University. Uh, and working for Langston is kind of a full circle for me. My aunt, where we lived in our community, um, we what nobody was thinking about going to school, and she was the first person to go to college. Um, she was a valedictorian in our little school, and the ag teacher had graduated from Langston University. He said, "You got to go to college." And so she caught a bus, came up to Langston and went to school and graduated and retired as a teacher in Cleveland, Ohio. And she's still living up there. But when she got out of high school to go to college, it wasn't real comfortable to go to OSU or OU as a black person. And so Langston was the place to go. And so that's where she went. And so Langston still has its place. It's a small college. Sometimes I go to OSU, it's so hard to find a parking place and all of that. So if you come out of a small community, it's a little bit more comfortable, I think, to come to Langston. And so I'm proud to be able to work here and try to teach. First of all, I want to share a couple of things. The hoops and things that I bought here, I bought them from Hometown Hardware there in Piedmont. It's a new store, and if you in and around Piedmont, stop in and pay patronage because they help a little bit with the food. Also, this is motorized sprayer. It's actually got a pressure ding on it. I used it to spray my pecan trees with. Came from Gillis Brothers in Yukon. They also help some with the food. So I just wanted to, if you're ever in that area, if you have a greenhouse, you need something like this because it itemizes the spray and gets it underneath the leaves in places that you can't get with a regular sprayer. But as y'all see, we're standing on this farm, even at my age, we actually bought a place when we first moved to Piedmont. It was 5 acres. We have a daughter that's handicapped. We wound up getting into some issues and because we couldn't really get help to her until she got 18. So we wound up losing that place. And so we rented, but everywhere I was renting, I was able to farm. People would let me farm it and this and that. And I was still selling stuff. But in the 2 years ago, I was able to purchase this place as my own farm. Now I may not live to see see it paid off. But my loan officer, he went to school with Micah Jr. And so we're trying to see if we can get him back to Oklahoma. Just pray that maybe that might happen. But I want him to come up and talk to you a little about the loan program and what have you. It gives you a little bit more time to pay it, so the payments is not quite as high and things like that.
Hi everybody, my name's Aaron Musney. I'm based out of the Kingfisher FSA office. We felt Micah helped purchase this right here. I don't really know everybody's background here, so I'm just going to kind of talk in some generalities. FSA has several types of loan programs. We have programs like this one that helps you buy real estate, and there's no lender that was going to be here. I was going to kind of talk a little bit about, but we have some programs where we can do 100% financing on the real estate, or if it goes over our limit of $600,000, like some of these places are bringing nowadays with the price of real estate. We have some programs that we do joint financing, which I can loan half of it and another lender loan the other half. Or we also have another program, it's called the down payment loan, which if you have 5% to put down, you can put 5% down. I can loan you 45% of the purchase price, and a commercial lender can help you loan the other half. It all just kind of depends on the situation. Everybody's operation is different. Some are fruits and vegetables. Most in our area are cattle and equipment, or cattle and wheat and that kind of thing. So that's what we can do for real estate. We also have the ability to help purchase equipment like this, or cattle, or help for operating expenses, and those would be 1 year and 7 year type loans. Just kind of depends on what they are. I always tell everybody, please call your local office because everybody's operation is going to be different, and especially west to east in Oklahoma, we have so much variation. I say call and talk to your local office and see what they can do to help you. So I was just going to be real short, real sweet. Real short and sweet. I'm not a public speaker, so that's really all I got. So I'll turn it back over to Micah.
Did anybody have any questions for him? Real quick or anything? Okay. Okay, so most of you probably know that I'm known as the plasticulture guru in Oklahoma. I've worked at the Department of Ag for 12 years, and I went all over the state and even into the Panhandle and put plasticulture gardens in. Some of the things I hadn't really done was done some stuff with different colors of plastic. We did do a little bit of red, and we seen some good results with tomatoes. And so some of the studies that I've been reading is that red is good for strawberries and tomatoes as far as production, and that the strawberries are sweeter and this and that. So I thought I'd try some strawberries on this red plastic. And then on this, the green is a plastic that is supposedly good with cantaloupes, maybe even watermelons, but they've seen some higher results is on cantaloupe mainly. And so I'm hoping to plant some cantaloupes on this green plastic. But these rows here, they have cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower, which is a cold crop. And we planted this the other day, but even a cold crop, when it got down to 25 degrees and we had just planted it, it hadn't had a chance to get rooted. And so you see the cover blew off down there, and we want to take some of this up to see what this looks like compared to where the cover blew off. Did Josh Campbell go to the other class? Okay, can you take some of this off, and just a little bit of it off, and so I mean, if you can walk down there and see, even as a cold crop, some of those plants down there, it literally killed them. Now there's some of them that I think may recover, but these ones that we covered with the row cover, they seem looks like they're all right. Yeah, yeah. Maybe pull some of this off over here and see what we got. I'm hoping we're not going to have any more 25 degrees, but who knows? So we may just leave this cover out here. It's called a row cover, or frost blanket. That's actually the same stuff that I have back here behind me. That's a much thicker one, and we have potatoes in there, sweet Irish potatoes, and they're coming up. And it helps. Each, like this one here is a very thin one. It gives you like 3 to 4 degrees. So okay, if it's 25, what I seen that night was 29. So I thought, well, okay, I'm fine with this. But 25, 3 or 4 degrees gets me up to about 30. But I think but being as a cold crop can take a little bit of a frost. But it's made for this. There's actually bigger farmers that have the whole fields covered with this stuff. And with the cold crops, you do want to get them started early, because it gets, all of a sudden it just gets hot. And if this stuff is not developed, then it'll bolt on you before it's ready to pick. So you got cabbage and broccoli and stuff, and you want to plant it as early as you can, but you may have to cover it to protect it. And then you could actually use this for, if you planted tomatoes maybe a few weeks early, and you could cover that and protect them so that they wouldn't kill them. But tomatoes, it's too early to plant tomatoes, but you could, in a few more weeks, you could plant the tomatoes and then cover it with this, and it would help it. And now, also, there's I'm gonna bed some sweet potatoes, and I'm gonna do some hoops like I did back here, and grow slips. Now, keep in mind as I'm going through this, you miss something, Oklahoma Gardening is going to come Tuesday and film everything that I'm doing. And so we're going to redo it all, and then it's going to be on Oklahoma Gardening, and you'll be able to see it. I don't know exactly when it'll come out. But I have another speaker here, and I need to bring him on, and then we'll finish up. I want to show you how to bed sweet potatoes to grow sweet potato slips. Farm credit. So we had the FSA credit talk. Now we're going to have a farm credit to have a few words.
Okay. So we're with Oklahoma Ag Credit. I'm Lane Winter. This is Sarah Rush and Kinsey. And so one of the things that we do is we offer real estate loans for ag property. And so that can be anything from, just depending on the size. We have the availability to do small tracts of land through a partnership with Rural First. And then the larger partnerships we can do in-house, and we also partner with FSA on a lot of transactions. So Oklahoma Ag Credit is part of the farm credit system, and we're founded over 100 years ago. And we are a cooperative, and so we're owned by our members, which is the coolest thing about that is we pay a dividend back to our customers every year. So, do you guys have any specific questions? Main competitive advantage is we do long-term fixed rates. So we can lock our rates up to 30 years. If you wanted, they include prepayability, patronage like we talked about, which is a dividend, and convertibility. So we can convert it at any time to a new stated rate without having to refinance the loan.
So is it just land, or is it also land if it has a house on it?
That's a great question. So it depends on the size of the acreage. If it's a smaller tract, we partner with Rural First on that, and they're part of the farm credit system, just exactly like we are. But they offer a much better product on a consumer. We consider that a consumer loan if it has a house on it. That's a great question, though.
Now, FSA, the house, that did mean something, as far as that was part of the value of it and everything. Yeah.
We do have different rules when it comes to housing. A lot of ours depends on the value of the house versus the value of the real estate. If the majority of the value of what we're doing is the house, we don't do that. The majority has to be the real estate.
That's a great question, though.
I had to write up a plan, but what made nice about this is that the pecan trees is high value. So I could have added like sheep or goats or something like that. And then I also added my watermelons and stuff that I have. Yeah. So I don't know if is that it?
Unless you have something else.
Okay. Any other questions for ag?
Somebody has a property in mind, or they have an idea of they have a farm business concept. Should they always start with the FSA office and then they're put in touch with Ag Credit?
So that's a great question, because we partner very well together, and so we actually bounce ideas off each other. The main thing is we want to make sure it's the best funding for the customer, and so whatever that looks like, we go that correct path. So if it's a large tract that we could do a partnership on, we'll do a partnership on. If it's something that does not qualify for their programs, they send it to us. If it doesn't qualify for our programs, we send it to Rural First. So we have a lot of different avenues.
So wherever somebody starts, they'll be guided along.
Absolutely, yeah.
Their best fit.
Yep, wherever their best fit. So the 50-50 program with FSA, I don't know if you touched on that a bit, but that's a really good program for first-time buyers. They do half the loan, we do half the loan. There's some eligibility requirements, and so I always encourage them to talk with Aaron or Hannah about those eligibility requirements, because they go past just credit quality, the basic things that you look at. So because it is a government program, you have to be eligible for that program.
And what Lane's kind of referring to is basically you have to be able to show that you've had 3 years of farm management experience. Majority of that means is you've been running your own operation typically, but there is some things that we can substitute for some of those years of eligibility. So that's where everybody's different, so I say talk to the local office and you can kind of figure out what works for you.
What do you consider a large? You said a large tract. What do you consider large?
Really anything over 10 to 20 acres. And it's gonna depend to the location. So 10 and 20 acres in Oklahoma City is different than 10 to 20 acres like around Cashin or Crescent or anything outside. Guys, any other questions? Outside of real estate, I mean, we do operating loans for cattle, crops, equipment.
How many of us are interested in sweet potatoes? Have an interest? Okay, good. So, huh? So this is my purple sweet potato, called Becca Purple. I ran across this sweet potato. I don't know that anybody else in the nation has these. I actually lost these because when we moved here, you know, it was like a year and we was trying to transition and everything. But I always share this story about the corn. I had shared this with like 3 or 4 people and everybody gave me some slips, so I was able to get my crop back. But so this is called Becca Purple. This one here is, I don't know if anybody has ever had the white sweet potato. This is called a bonita. It's a really good tasting sweet potato. And then this one is a white sweet potato, but it's got a purple skin, and it's Murasaki. And what I'm gonna do right here in this spot, what I didn't put the plastic, is I'm gonna grow sweet potato slips. And we put compost and a lot of different things down. And you would lay these kind of out like this. Just leave a little space between them. And then I'm gonna get some more. I ran out of my soil. I'm gonna cover that up completely. Then I'm gonna do what I did behind y'all, where I had the PCP pipes with rebar, and I put the rebar on each side and put PCP pipe over it, and then I'm gonna stretch plastic over it. So it's just like a hoop house, a miniature hoop house. And it'll warm it up inside, because sweet potatoes is a tropical crop. So, but if I wait till the time to plant them to grow the slips, I don't have slips yet. So right now we've been getting, you know, a lot of us get slips from like K-State. Well, that's north of us. Well, we could be already done planted sweet potatoes 2 or 3 weeks before then. But if I build this and I build a hoop house over it, it warms it up, then I can get the slips and they'll come off at the time that I can plant sweet potatoes. We did this one year in February. I had a conference and we did this, and we actually covered them up and everything. And we had some cold days, and we ran a little electric heater out to it underneath that, and it warmed it up, and it done great. So.
Micah, is a slip just the seedling, or like eyes for the sweet potatoes?
Okay, you crossing up an Irish potato and a sweet potato. On an Irish potato, you cut the potato, the eye, and you leave a hunk of the potato and you plant that. And we did that in those tubs behind you. And probably before you leave, we're gonna take that off, but while y'all, after you eat or whatever, you can take a look, because they're starting to come up. And because when you plant it in a container like that, it's not connected to the ground, so it warms up faster. So it was able to, like, probably not very many people got Irish potatoes up already, but those are coming up. But the sweet potatoes, you plant the whole potato. The sweet potato is the actual root, and it's totally different plant from an Irish potato. So it's the root, and you plant that actual potato, and it grows slips. And you can pull the slips and plant them, and then it'll grow more slips. So you could grow slips for a month off these same potatoes and keep pulling them and replanting them. But not only that, sweet potato is a plant that every part of it can be eaten. The potato, the stem, the Asian people eat the stem. They taste like green beans. In Africa, they eat the leaves. Some of Africa, have you ate some of the leaves before? Yeah, yeah. So they they taste like greens. You put chicken with them or whatever. So every part of that plant can be eaten, and so it's an amazing plant. But not only that, once it starts to vine out, if you get them planted early enough, you can cut off a vine and replant it, and it'll grow you another whole thing of sweet potatoes.
Gina has a question.
Yes.
You gonna sell any slips? Ooh.
Yeah, I could be selling. I probably will be selling some slips. We did this demonstration about 10 years ago in Old Muggy, and she sold a bunch of slips.
Where do we buy your slips?
Here, I don't know. Just get a hold to me.
Text him.
Yeah, just get a hold to me. Is there any other questions? But
What's the advantage to growing slips in the dirt versus just a jar of water or something?
well, you're not gonna get many slips in a jar of water. That's fine. I guess if you could just put a bunch of jars of water around your house and grow them that way, that'd be all right. But you're gonna be able to get a lot more production out of this, and you can, like I say, you pull them and then you're gonna grow more. And if you grow that in a jar, you probably ain't gonna get enough. It probably not gonna grow back fast enough. When they get to going, they really get going. And then other thing I was gonna talk about is the wire. That's nothing but just some heavy gauge wire, and what it's doing is just holding that cloth from pressing down on my plant to damage the plant. And so you just make your hoops like that. They actually make some clear plastic with holes in it, and I've used that. I couldn't find it. Well, it was supposed to come, but it didn't come, and it needs the holes in it so it can have a little bit of breathing, because it'll get too hot underneath there. And even with that cloth, I think maybe because of rain, it's sweating a little bit under there. But these are cold crops, and I'm going to take this cover off unless it freezes again, like it did before down to 25 degrees. Now, if it barely gets freezing, once this stuff gets rooted, the cold crops, they'll be fine.
I'm Rob Moselle. I'm here today wearing a couple of hats, I guess, but during this breakout session, I'm wearing my American Plant Products and Services hat. So we're a wholesaler here in Oklahoma City. So we raise and sell house plants to florists and nurseries and garden centers and greenhouses. And then our bigger part of our business is designing and building greenhouse structures and all the equipment and supplies for greenhouses and cold frames and shade houses. So from the structures to the plastic to the polycarbonate, the heating, the cooling, the benches, whatever. And then we also are in the supply business. And so we stock a little over 10,000 items of everything from plastic film to pots and soils and so forth. So that's where we're at today. And I actually just figured out this week, I guess this is our 50th anniversary. So hadn't taken time to figure out that 1974 when we started to now is 50 years, but it is. So, but so we've survived a lot when we look back, a lot of ups and downs. But actually our family started in the vegetable production or truck cropping business at Pauls Valley. So from as soon as I could walk or do anything, we were out in the fields planting tomatoes and peppers and squash and corn and okra and all those kind of good things, or spent a lot of time weeding, as you all know, and then harvesting. And I was telling the earlier group, one of the great treats was one of the main markets Mom and Dad had was selling fresh produce to restaurants here in the city. So back at that time, there was Val Jean's restaurant at Penn Square and the O'Mealy's cafeterias, and actually Val Jean's had a series of them. So getting to help load up all the vegetables and the pick up and ride with Dad to come to the city to go to the different restaurants to deliver the vegetables was always a big deal as a first or second or third grader or whatever. And treat we look back on. And at that time, Mrs. O'Mealy was still alive, and so when you delivered there, well, she'd see any of us kids or with them, make us sit down and would feed us something. And anyway, that was a big cool deal. So, but I can ramble on about anything. I've been blessed in these 50 years to not only see a lot of things here in Oklahoma and do a lot of things, but to visit a lot of greenhouse and nursery and vegetable production operations around the country. So, so certainly would be, you know, anytime you have questions, shout them out, and we'll go off on whatever tangent you want to go on. One of the things that makes the horticulture industry so interesting is it's not all the same thing. And even chicken farmers will tell you it's not all the same chicken farm. But in horticulture, it's a million different things because everybody picks different crops. You've got different environments to grow in. One of the big things when you're doing outdoor production of things like vegetables or fruit is figuring out the microclimates. And you know, even your own property won't all be the same. You'll figure out there's spots where the wind is blocked by a barn or the house or a row of trees, or where the soil is a little different and water holds longer or drains quicker. So figuring out the personality of your property and what microclimate you have and matching it up to the crops, you know, is a big deal. Now there's some things you can do to help control the environment by using things like mulch films and row covers, or as you get to a point where you want to invest in a cold frame or a hoop house, or even further if you want to invest into a greenhouse where we're controlling more of the environment. But one of the interesting things is tax-wise, a greenhouse is not a building. A lot of times in your first building, you think of it as a building, and when you meet with a tax guy, you go to depreciate it that way. But it's actually, if you're using it for production, not for retailing, the government actually considers it a piece of equipment because you're trying to create an environment. You're trying to create an environment for whatever crop you're growing, so you would depreciate it and treat it like a piece of equipment rather than a building because of that. So I see a question here, and we'll just go whatever direction you all want to go.
Do you guys put up hoop houses too, or mostly greenhouses? Or
We do.
what are y'all seeing the most demand for lately?
We do both. We do put up both hoop houses and greenhouses. We probably our crew, most folks that do hoop houses, just because the expense of a crew's doing it, probably put up hoop houses themselves or with friends or with neighbors. When you get into a more sophisticated greenhouse with heating and cooling or shade and so forth, more of those are probably put up with crews. And we've got 3 crews that are out full time putting up greenhouses, and so the greenhouse side would be what we do more construction on. As far as number of structures we sell, it's probably, I haven't sat down to look at that lately, but it's probably pretty balanced between the cold frames and the greenhouses. And one of my big, you know, is as much as you can, if you do a cold frame or something, a lot of times you'll want to evolve into a greenhouse at some point. So I really encourage people, especially with the wind and conditions we have in Oklahoma, it's better to spend a little more on the frame so that it's a frame that's heavy enough that you can come back and add equipment to, or even possibly put a permanent glazing on at some point in the future, than if it's so light that that you don't have a lot of those options. So because you're going to live with that forever once it's up. So there's a lot of things you can do to upgrade it if you invest in one that's a little bit heavier to give you those options.
How
But
many conversions have you done? Or so you're saying that you can convert your high tunnel into a greenhouse with some equipment or some
yes,
changes?
yeah, and most businesses that stay around for very long dream of or evolve to having more equipment so you can control more of the circumstances. You know, you all know, even by just the difference yesterday at this time to today, how much the weather can change in Oklahoma, and it, you know, certainly can vary a lot from year to year. I mean, we've been in an exceptionally warm stretch, you know, for several weeks here, way out of normal, where we've been way above normal. So a lot of things are running way ahead of the season now. If we get a really hard freeze, you know, it can really snap things back. And it was just 3 years ago when we had a freeze on May 3rd or something, which, you know, probably right here where Mike is at, probably the last average freeze date is probably around April 7th to 10th or something like that normally. But normal doesn't happen every year in Oklahoma. So I mean, so 1 year a hoop house without any equipment may be a real advantage and may get you 6 extra weeks in the spring and 6 extra weeks in the fall. The next year, if we get a real hard freeze real early, you know, it's knocked you out and taken that advantage away, you know, right away. So you can't count on it every year with that, you know. So if you go through a year when you've got a lot invested and you get an early freeze out, it becomes high on your list to figure out how to get heat in there for some future year. And so that's usually how we evolve in this area, because we want to get control of more circumstances. Usually the more years we're into it and the further we get along. So and we get pretty much, you know, we got a crew up putting up a greenhouse in Fargo, North Dakota now, and we don't get as cold as Fargo, North Dakota, thankfully, but we get real winter here. I mean, we do get real winter challenges here. And most of you, all of you can remember that one just a couple years ago in February when we got, I mean, that's the worst one I've been through, that we got the -20 or whatever it was. That's even things that were designed to handle a lot didn't end up handling that one. But we can count on getting really hot in the summer. So one of our real challenges in the horticulture world here is, even with the best you can't afford real air conditioning. So even with the very best evaporative cooling, it's a challenge in July and August, and you know what crops you can do at that time of year. And so that's why a lot of people kind of use that as a time to phase out and clean up and get ready for the next, with a few exceptions. But it's things like a lettuce. If you're trying to do greenhouse lettuce, it just can't hardly do greenhouse lettuce in July and August, even with the very best cooling that we have available. But so you still have to use a lot of judgment and know what your conditions are and how to evolve with it. I think one of the really missed opportunities here is shade houses. You know, tomatoes, as you all know, when it gets around 90 degrees, they're just not setting fruit no matter what it looks like. And I think there's a lot of our vegetable crops that if we put them under shade in the summer, we could get a lot more, you know, extension later into the season. So I think that's one of the assets that's least utilized that would be feasible here. And that takes a lot less structure to support shade than it would a full greenhouse. But we had a few people play with that, but nobody's jumped off very big in that yet. But what other questions have you got? I can keep rambling if you don't have questions, but if you got a question, I'll head in the direction you want me to go.
Do you work closely with OSU or on like, you know, if someone brings the report that says, okay, we're missing this and this, do you guys help with like knowing how much to actually get per acre or any of that, or do we need to be coming in to American Pest Products with all of our numbers already figured out?
No, I mean, we do try to help on that, and by the way, it's really important if you haven't already tested, like one of the first things you ought to do if you're trying to do horticultural production of any type is know what your water is and know what your soil is. So make sure to get good soil test and good water test so that you know what you're dealing with. And you know, it's really interesting in Oklahoma. Basically, we've got pretty clean water in the northeast part of the state, and as you move across the state to the west, we get to really, really hard water. And the break line is right here and around I-35. But the further west you go, we get into really hard water where it's really hard to lower the pH, and that leads to a higher pH, and it's hard to lower it. So knowing what those things are, so we or somebody like us can help figure out what to do. It's a lot easier the easiest way to solve those things is with water soluble. We can target and respond quickest with that, but there are options in agricultural fertilizers or slow release fertilizers that can help address that too. But if you get to a drip system where you can do water soluble and you can inject in your water, whether it's acids or something to lower the pH, or whether it's picking out which nutrients to target, but there's a huge variation depending on where your property's at and what your water source is of what you're dealing with. So.
And on his farm, he actually has he does it directly into the drip irrigation.
Right. Yeah, he's using a proportioner and he's injecting his fertilizer in, and that's when you get to any larger greenhouse or nursery operation, that's going to be the main thing, and we can do that quicker. It's not. I'm not going to say it's quite like intravenous drugs when you're at the hospital, but you can get a quicker you can get a quicker response with the liquid than we can with any of the granulars or slow releases. But knowing what conditions you have and then figuring out how to address them, and sometimes it affects changing what crops you go, because there's some crops that maybe your conditions just don't really match up good with. So that's why visiting with your local extension office on that is a big deal, and they can help with tests, and there's some good private labs as well, or we're glad to help with that as well. But and then another big thing along that area besides nutrition is the soil, just general soil quality. And most of you, I think all of us that work with plants know how important the soil is. It's literally the foundation, or it's like the footing for a building. Well, the soil is our foundation or our footing for whatever crop we're growing. So we're always working to get more organic matter in there because it increases the aeration and drainage, and we're always working to change the feel and make that soil perform better. So keeping that soil in good shape should be one of your primary focuses. That you take care of the soil and it'll take care of you, is the adage that's kicked around forever. So and that can get interesting. Sometimes you'll have somebody close by that's got fresh manure or something, and I'm always hesitant about that when age it for a while if you're going to use that before you. Over the years, I've gotten to see a lot of examples of why you want to make sure that's composted or aged for a while before you do that. But it can be a good asset. Just almost any organic matter can be good if you handle it right. So, any other questions you've got? I guess one of the questions that came up earlier that I thought was a good question was about what somebody's asked me to tell them what crop they ought to grow, and I really can't tell you that. I mean, there's markets for every kind of crop. The biggest issue we face, you pretty well can find directions, or these days you can find fact sheets from either. I'm a huge land grant university proponent, so I'd encourage you to use all the information and people and fact sheets like from Oklahoma State University or Langston in particular, because they're local and their information is going to mean the best. If they don't have something there you need, well, then look at Arkansas and Texas A&M and Kansas State, the ones in our region for direction. But from production-wise, there's lots of good information out there that you can access and find. But the big issue that we all face is who's your customer and what's your market. So it doesn't do any good to grow something if you're really good at growing it, if nobody wants to buy it, or they won't buy it at a price that you can make a profit at. So figure out whether you're selling directly at your own farm market stand, whether you're going to farmers markets, whether you're selling to restaurants or grocery stores or selling to a wholesaler, and then visit with the people whatever your market's going to be. Visit with them, find out what they're wanting, what they need, what they're willing to pay. Don't be afraid to ask questions and probe. And just because they say they want it doesn't mean it'll work. We had a guy in this last week that was wanting to put up a greenhouse to raise pineapples because he heard they needed a local pineapples. I said, you can grow local pineapples, but you can't afford to. I mean, there's no economics in it. So just because somebody wants something doesn't mean it'll work. So you need to use some common sense and think things through besides just listening to them. But know who your customer is and ask questions and find your market is the big deal. So.
Well, if he's growing those as houseplants,
yeah, houseplants is a different deal. But even then, if you wanted to do them with the fruit, the time it takes, basically in a greenhouse heated and cooled, depending on somebody's cost of operation, every square foot in that greenhouse costs 25 cents to 50 cents a week. So you have to think, how many weeks is that plant on the bench that I'm heating, cooling, and watering it, and whether the economics work. So there's a whole lot of things we can do that don't make financial sense. Or if you're doing it just for a hobby or to enjoy it, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, but if you're trying to do it to make a profit, you need to think about, besides thinking about whether you can grow it, you got to think about, is there somebody to buy it and what price will they buy it at, and is that a price that'll cover your expenses? So, but any other questions you've got? How many of you currently are doing vegetable market gardening? Okay. How many of you are hoping to get into that? I presume. Okay. Well, there's a whole lot of different phases of horticulture. So, one thing we find is once you get involved and are doing one type of production, we've had vegetable folks that turn into grape vineyard folks. We've had vegetable people turn into greenhouse folks. Had vegetable people that just keep growing and what kinds of things they're growing and find niches to, they'll have restaurants that approach them and want very specific things grown at certain times of the year. So it can go it's not just one path. There's 1,000 different paths, and so you just have to jump in and start exploring and start finding your way. And most all of us, one of the neat things about horticulture and about agriculture is most of us are very willing to talk with one another and to share. And so most of us will share experiences and help how we can. However we can help at American Plant Products, or however any of y'all can help each other, please reach out. Don't be afraid to ask questions and jump in and get your hands dirty and have a good time. So hopefully sell a bunch. So any other questions? Okay, well I hope, yesterday was mainly breakout work sessions, wasn't it? Or workshops?
Yeah.
So
this is all hands on.
So
Look at stuff.
yeah.
Look at dirt
Yeah.
and dead plants.
Well, and we keep figuring out better ways to do things. Technology-wise, I look back in the 60s is when plastic film first came into the market. When the first hoop houses were put up was, I think it was Rutgers University came up with the first hoop house design and came up with the first plastic film in the early 60s. And since then, now commercially, it's the dominant glazing. But the plastics back then, I remember Dad standing at the window, just praying that it wouldn't blow off in March. When back then it was a battle to see whether the plastic was going to break down and crystallize before you got to spring. Nowadays we got plastics that we call 4-year plastics, and a lot of times if somebody's putting shade over them in the winter, even though in the summer, even though they're 4-year plastics, we got people that come in want what they got the last time, and it was 7 or 8 years ago. So
We just left Whitmore Farms, and he said he had a 4-year plastic that lasted 7 years.
Yeah, and we can't tell you it'll do that, but there's a lot of that goes on, especially if you cover it in the summer with shade. One of the things that, we talk some about fertilizer and we talk some about soil. Light is a big deal, and most of us don't realize that on a bright sunny day in December, we measure light in foot candles for growing. How much light do you think we get in December on a bright sunny day, the middle of the day? We get 4,000 or 5,000 foot candles. So how many foot candles do you think we get in June or July or August in the middle of a day on a bright sunny day? We get 15,000, 16,000. So we're getting about 4 times as much light. And not only that, the plants measure cumulative light. Well, in the winter, the days are much shorter, and it's not very often in the winter that you get a full day. So that's why you hear even greenhouse guys sometimes talk about lighting some in the winter, depending on what they're growing or whatever, is because we get a fraction of the light. It's not just a fourth of the light, it's even less than that because we don't get it for as many hours. Where in the summer, you all know how long the days are, and basically it gets a minute longer every morning and every evening, and and the intensity grows by 4 times. So that's why plants, if we get the water to them when it's bright and sunny, it's amazing how you can kick tail, because the factory's moving. The photosynthesis factory is moving at a whole different rate of speed in June and July than it is in December or January. So, we all have days like that ourselves where we feel kind of lethargic or something. That's what plants may feel like in December and January, when, even if it's an evergreen or something, or even in the greenhouse of crops, compared to when it warms up, they're just a whole lot more energy because there's a whole lot more light driving the plant and driving all the plant factory that's there. So you just knowing how those things operate and thinking about those and the implications it has for you and your production they're a big deal. So, okay. Any other question? I see Micah's still talking over there. Yeah.
What are your biggest products that you sell to like small, mid-sized fruit vegetable growers?
Oh, to fruit and vegetable growers, probably the biggest would be to vegetable growers, it's probably things like soil mixes and starter soils, propagation soil, growing soils, small containers, all those things you use for starting the crops and carrying on are probably the bigger things. For fruit growers, it's going to be more things like pruning tools and paints and chemicals and fertilizers, that kind of thing. So probably drip irrigation, because and where you all are using mainly more disposable things like the thin wall hose for vegetables. A lot of times orchards are using a heavier weight, longer life drip irrigation, where we're trying to get 10 or 15 years out of it, and instead of getting a season or two. But you know, the impact that plastics had, the plastic film to cover greenhouses, the plastic film for mulch film, for row covers, for twin wall hose, it's revolutionized horticultural production. I mean, and all that's happened really since the 60s. All those things, I mean, so that's really pretty recent innovations on all those things. But they've, you know, and we get frustrated with the plastics, and you know, we're doing a lot of work playing with biodegradable things. But the problem is, the biodegradables, none of them are to a stage where we can control the timing on it. So it's really hard. It's really hard to match up one that lasts just the right amount of time for when you need it for your crop. And so I'd say we're not there yet with any of those things yet. But some recycling things on parts of those things work, but the biodegradable is it's either biodegrading too quick for you or not quick enough. So it's really hard. We don't have control to have it happen at 16 weeks or at 12 weeks or whatever. It's not where we can control that yet. So, but any other questions? When Micah was, I think he was showing you the row cover and the mulch films and all. Those mulch films, but again, to show how important land grant universities are, it was University of New Hampshire that did all the first work in our country with mulch films, and came up with the mulch films. And then, of course, since then, they, and particularly the Israelis, have done a whole lot of work with colored mulch films and trying to decide if there is a difference in production consistently, you know, based on which crop. And one of the things that makes it tough in Oklahoma is our conditions vary so much from year to year. So like, we have a lot of strawberry growers that have played with the red mulch, and one year it may seem to really make a difference. The next year, you may not notice any difference at all compared to even using black mulch, much less black white. And that's because our weather conditions change so dramatically from year to year that it makes it very hard to say year in and year out that's the answer. So if you decide to do something like that, you just kind of have to play with it for a few years and decide if that extra expense is worth it enough years to be worth that extra cost. But
make sure your garden pretty.
Yeah, it does.
Have all the colors.
Yeah, the black white is still black is still the cheapest of the mulch films, and if you're planting early, it's hard to beat it just because it warms up the soil, and hopefully your canopy on whatever crop covers it up before it gets very hot, and so you don't notice that. The black white allows you to, if you're planting early, to have the black side up for heating up the soil, and if you're planting later, white side up, you know, to help cool the soil. So the black white is probably 75% of all the sales in Oklahoma now because it allows you to vary it by crop or by timing. And then the row cover, that's actually, anybody know what that came from? I mean, for years people would go out with a sheet or a blanket or milk bottles or something. Anybody know what industry that's a spin-off from when they came up with row covers? It's the diaper industry. It's a diaper liner. So, and of course those we've got in 0.6 ounce and 1.5 ounce and 2.5 ounce, and so the heavier it is, the more temperature difference it can give you. That 0.6 ounce that we use a lot on vegetables, it'll make a 2 to 4 degree difference, something like that. So it won't help you in a really hard cold snap, but it'll, you know, if it's a real light freeze or something, it can make a real difference in saving the crop. But by the time you get the 1.5 ounce weight or the 2.5 ounce weight, that 2.5 ounce weight, if you got it anchored good around the edges, you know, it can make up 7, 8, 9 degrees difference on a night with the heavier row cover. So, so lots of choices, lots of options, whether it's lighting or whether it's ground cover or mulch film or plastic film. There's, you know, the choices are incredible.
My name's Marcio White. I'm an instructor in the Engineering Technology Department and the Agricultural Science Department at Langston University. Want to, thank Dr. Whitaker, our dean, Dr. Matan, our chair, Dr. Gibson, which is our lead research scientist on our precision agriculture program, Dr. Cabet, which is taking over the drone program, and then Micah, that's just recently asked us to come out and do a demonstration here. We've got a team of students from our engineering department. We have a team of students that work on this project from our computer science project, and then we have biology students and agricultural science students that are working on this project. We have 4 different areas that we use our drones in: orchards, pasture, livestock, and we also do aquaculture. We're just now starting in aquaculture. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to a couple of our students. They're going to talk briefly about our drone program, and then we've got a student that's going to demonstrate 2 different phases of the drone flights that we do with the project. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Sterling.
How are you guys doing? My name is Sterling Warren. I'm a junior agribusiness major from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and also the project manager of the Sky Wrangler project. And so what the Sky Wrangler is the smart application of precision livestock farming for grazing animals and pasture management using UAVs. And so we have one overall goal, and the overall goal is to create a smart but inexpensive UAV that provides usable and concise feedback for livestock producers to manage their pastures and animals. And we'll be doing this in 4 objectives. So objective number 1, to assess the pasture biomass and nutritive status using UAVs. Number 2, to determine the effective presence, distance, and duration of UAVs on animal stress and behavior. Number 3, to inventory grazing animals. And number 4, to monitor the health status of grazing animals as well. And so I'll get into the lab assistants that we have in our lab. One of our great lab assistants right here is Ms. Jada Watson. She's our engineering lead on the team, and she's also our flight missions manager. We also have, as well in the lab, we have Mr. Adam Studemeyer. He's our animal welfare. He takes care of the animals or the goats that we test in our on campus. And then we also have Mr. Terrence Woodard. He's our computer scientist. Miss Andrea Scales, she's a computer scientist as well. And then our last one, Miss Tyriana Lister, she's our NDVI specialist, which is the normalized difference vegetational index. And this scans for the chlorophyll in the grass to tell us if the grass is healthy or not for the animals to graze. So here in our hands, we have the Sky Wrangler drones that were created by students in our lab at Langston University. So right here you have the Ironman, what do we call it?
650.
Ironman 650, and then also the S500. And the Ironman, again, the goal of the project was to create an inexpensive UAV. So the Ironman here is $1,500, while the S500 is $900. And yeah, that'll conclude our short presentation for you guys.
So now what we're going to do is Jada's going to do the first phase of data collection for the NDVI, which is Nutritive Differential Vegetation Index. She's going to be using the Mavic 3. If you wouldn't mind turning around, facing this direction. Safety is going to be our utmost, priority in this. So if you would, stay behind me. And she's going to go out and do her pre-flight checks on this drone. We're going to go ahead and cover Micah's property here. She's going to be collecting aerial photographs. She's going to be collecting also the NDVI data, the actual amount of chlorophyll that's in the plants. And if you're growing, if you're into agriculture, that's going to be really important to you. And then we're going to transition that data over to our large applicator drone. But first, she's going to go ahead and do this. She'll take off. You got ready?
Yep.
She's done all of her pre-flight checks. She's going to check the rotors on the drones, make sure that they're securely attached to the motors. She's going to make sure that the batteries are charged. She's done all of that. Now she's going to just do a pre-flight check, making sure that her roll, pitch, and yaw positions are all working properly. Now there's 2 different cameras on this particular drone. We have the video camera and the photograph camera on this drone, and then the green camera up back, it's the NDVI camera, which is going to detect the amount of chlorophyll that's in the plants. All right, so she's going through all of her pre-flight checks. Everything's operating properly. She's going to land it, and she's already set up a route to collect the data over his property. She's positioned 4 points at each corner. Go ahead and fly it. And it's going to determine the transects that it needs to fly to collect the aerial photographs and to collect the NDVI data. So it's an autonomous flight, so she's went ahead and sent it off on its flight, and it's going to go to its start position. It uses Global Positioning System, GPS, to locate where it's at. Once we've created the rectangle, the area that we want it to fly in, it determines the transects that it needs to fly. So it's at its start point, and it's moving to the first transect point on its property. What's happening?
It just arrived.
Okay, it just arrived at the start point. And as it's flying, it's collecting data. It's collecting aerial photographs and NDVI data. Every 5 seconds, it's going to take a picture. These are all orthographic photographs, and it's going to have a GPS point location at the center of that. It's going to overlap it, and when you process this information into a GIS system, it's going to give you a nice overall picture of the property of Micah's here.
What altitude is it flying at?
300. 300 feet that it's flying at. We determined that earlier today. So it's just completed its 2 transects. It'll come back, automatically land itself in the same location that it took off from, the home position. Now Sterling, tell them about the price 10 years ago and the price that we're at right now with these drones.
So the drone capability has gone, it's always improving, of course, but the prices of these drones have consistently gotten lower over the years. We have a drone in the lab that we paid $10,000 for, or no, I'm sorry, $40,000 for 10 years ago that has the same capabilities as this right here. And then we also have another drone. Well, this drone was just bought last year for $5,000. So you can see that the pricing of the drones are getting lower and lower by the year. And as you can see, we also do have the Sky Wrangler drones as well. And those are going for, again, $1,500. And then you have the S500 that's going for $900. So we're still trying to keep, we're still keeping an eye on that market. And we're also always watching the prices of our drones because we always want to make it as inexpensive as we can. So.
Can we do the big one?
We're doing it right now. We're going to do it right now. What we're going to do is we're going to take that data that we collected, transfer it over to the large multi-rotor drone, which is an applicator drone. It applies pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizer. Micah wanted us to come out and see if we could actually put together a project where we could spray for some pests that were on in the pecan trees. So she's going to go ahead and demonstrate. We're not spraying any pesticides today. We have water in the tank. It's a brand new tank, so we're not worried about that, okay? But she will demonstrate the spray, and then she's going to fly it over one of the trees and give you a demonstration on that. You ready, Jada? What's wrong with it? Yeah, it's fine. If you guys want to come up to where we're at, you're fine. If you would like to come up to this point, go ahead. She's connecting to the drone now. She's already previously done all of her pre-flight checks. Go ahead. Gonna go ahead and arm the drone. She's going to do a pre-flight check on this. She'll do her pitch forward, yaw left, yaw right, pitch forward. She's going to pitch back, roll right, roll left. Now she's going to just demonstrate the spray. and there's a spray. Go ahead, and she's going to fly over the pecan tree here. £65 by itself, dry weight. It has a capability of 30 liters. It will fly for 1 hour with the battery that's on board with it. And then she has the ability to spray. How many acres?
40 acres.
40 acres per battery per tank. 30 liters. Now she's going to go ahead and bring it back. This is the T30. $22,000 for this particular drone here. And you need both. The Mavic 3, which is $5,000, plus another $3,000 for the camera, and then you take that data and upload it in this. Now, this is going to mitigate the effects of pesticides and herbicides on the environment, because it'll precisely locate those areas that are damaged, that has problems. We'll take samples, send it to our OSU group. They're going to tell us exactly what we need to do with that, and then we'll load up the applicator drum with the proper application. Okay? Any questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jada. Thank you, Sterling. Thank you, everyone.